making things that customers love. So I blog a lot at melissaperi.com or at ListTGene. You can tweet me. I also was in your shoes not too long ago and started a company in Italy. And here you can see me with the Prime Minister of Italy at the time. I was giving him one of our shirts for the accelerators. And if you look closely, I'm wearing a Lean Startup shirt, which you're probably familiar with. This is Get Out of the Building. And the funny thing about this is that that Prime Minister was removed from office. He was kicked out of office not too long after we took this picture together. So that's my claim to fame in Italy. But normally I'm located in New York. So let's kick this off. UX, user experience. So when I was first starting off in my career, I was working for a startup in New York City, and I was called a product manager. And before that too, I was working in a larger bank, and I was called a product manager, a larger startup too. And I always had this term, but I was doing pretty much the same thing I'd always been doing. I was just create experiences for my customers through their products. So one day in the startup I was working at, OpenSky, I remember our boss came in and said, "Hey guys, we're going to hire a director of user experience." And I was like, "What is this user experience thing?" And they're like, "Oh, they're going to do all the wireframing, figure out all the interfaces." And I was like, that's what we pretty much did as product managers. So to this day, we keep splitting up these things as product management and UX, and I do believe there are a lot of roles that UX designers maybe would do rather than a product manager would, but a lot of it's very overlapped. And I think it just boils down to making things that customers want, understanding who they are. UX kind of blew up in the last couple of years. So right at the time when we hired the user experience designer, I remember it became this huge thing where it was like, oh, all we need is UX and it will solve all of our problems. And UX designers became this like magical unicorn of a person. Everybody wanted one, but they didn't really know what to do with them. And I ran into this problem too, where people would hire me as a UX designer and they would put me into more of a traditional visual design role. They cared about making things pretty, not necessarily making them usable for customers. So today what I want to talk to you about is what are the golden rules of user experience and what should you remember when you're trying to make the best UX for your customers in your product? And how do you get out of that rut of thinking that UX is just visual design? So rule number one, design for the user, not yourself. So we call it user experience for a reason. We don't call it the designer's experience. But this is something really hard for founders to get their heads around. At the beginning, we really love having this kind of control over what we're building, and we love watching our ideas come to life, right? But you have to remember that it's always the user who knows best. So you have to make sure that you're constantly designing for them and putting yourself in their shoes. You're not your user. So to give you an example, signing this application for a company last year, and what it was doing was consolidating student loans. So I made a couple mock-ups. I understood what they were looking for. I talked to some people who were consolidating their student loans or in the market to do that, and I made this this mock-up for them where you could go through this easy flow, answer a few questions, and then have this done in about 10 minutes. Super simple. Right now it takes hours. And I showed it to them, and the founder goes, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And I go, okay. So I went back to the drawing board, took some of his feedback, did it again. Showed it to him again. No, I don't want that. I said, finally, what do you want? He goes, well, I just want kayak, right? All I want you to do is recreate kayak for loans. Just kind of a weird request. But he had it in his head that all the users wanted to do tons and tons and tons of filtering down on these applications to find the loans. So we ended up mocking up something that looked more like this. And it had way too many filters on the left-hand side. It was really complicated to use, and the users hated it. But because the founder was so wrapped up in it, he couldn't see that. He was like, nope, we just have to recreate for loans and everything will be solved. So here's a great example of where UX fails. So another example too is I was working with a company, a startup last year. I love their premise. They're helping women try to succeed at careers and jobs. Great idea. And when I went in, they said, can you help us launch a mobile app? And why do you want to launch a mobile app? And they go, well, we've got this great idea. It's Tinder for networking, right? So you can just pull up your app and it will be all these women that you can connect with and look for in your city, and you can swipe left or right on them, decide if you want to go out for a chat with them. And I was like, this sounds like a terrible idea, especially as a woman who would probably be using this. And I asked him, like, how did you come up with this idea? And they said, well, we all sat around a table and we thought it up and we, hey, if we just built this thing, we would love to use it, so other people must like to use it. We're also millennial women. We're our target demographic. Go out of the building, talk to about 20 women about the potential of this idea, and they hated it. Every person we talked to was like, oh, I'm not going to use Tinder for like business, for networking. They hated the idea. So it was really easy to disprove that it wasn't a great idea. So one of the best ways to do it is just get out there, ask your customers, do you really want this? And when they say no, you know that you can move on. Because at the end of the day, what we need to remember as UX designers is that we are not our customer. So no matter how close you are in demographic or age or situation to the people you're building for, immediately just say, you know what, I'm not my customer. I'm going to go out and make sure that I'm building what they want and not necessarily what. It's something to really pay attention to. Next, rule 2, design needs a goal. This is a really big thing I run into all the time. A lot of times we design based on feeling and empathy, which could be a good thing, but design always needs a goal. You shouldn't be designing just for the sake of designing. You should be designing towards something. So a lot of times I come in to companies and they go, we're doing a UX refresh. We're just going to rip up our entire site, redesign it, and put it back out there. And if we do that, everybody will come. So they pitch this to the company, and the company goes, yeah, like, sweet, we're going to get behind this. We're going to have great design. But it's my job to come in and go, why? Why are you doing a UX refresh? If you don't have any goals specifically tied to why you want to do a UX refresh, you're going to go in the wrong direction. Just designing things pleasingly or visually usually doesn't produce the results that you're looking for. So when we do design things, we need to really look at our goals. And there's lots of goals that we have for design. We can delight our customers. We can engage them more in our product. We can convert them into paying customers or just get them on the site, learn them about something, or we can incentivize them to take actions on our site. So anytime that you approach design, you should really be looking at what is my goal to do this. And if you're redesigning parts of your page, make sure that they align back to these things. If you don't do that and you start copying other people's designs or you look at new trends, you can run into trouble. I really like this example. If you look at BBC News on the left-hand side, they had this news story out where they would put everything in little boxes on there. And Pulse, which is LinkedIn's news source, try to copy them, but it doesn't work for them, right? They literally just copy this, but that kind of layout doesn't work for them because in BBC News, you know what photos on there. You have a lot of control over what content, what headline you can put on this. Pulse is just pulling whatever anybody posts. It might have a photo, it might not have a photo. You don't know how long the headline is. So you have to really make sure that you're designing around your context and not just copying other ideas. Tinder swiping is great, but it doesn't work for everybody, right? So goals should lead your design decisions. Make sure that you always relate it back to something that you can go back and measure and look for and know the why behind why you're designing. Rule number 3, keep it simple. So a lot of companies run into this thing I call the build trap. And it happens with a lot of startups where you go, the more features I add and the more stuff I have on here, the more people will come, right? And customers will not use your product based on how many features you have. They only use it to solve a problem. So that's why we get so many of these applications. When you go in here, people are like, what is all this stuff, right? All of a sudden, I've got a new feature popping up on this app every single day, or I don't know how to use it. It's incredibly complicated. The more things you add to your product, the more complex it is to use. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to make it too complicated for your users. A really great example of a company that does this well is Shazam. When you open Shazam, you have just one big button that push and it listens to the music going on and then it spits back what song is playing. That's the only goal of Shazam, is to look up what song is playing and spit it back to you. And they take up about 80 to 90% of their real estate on their page with just that button, right? Super simple. Speed is a key factor here, right? If a song is playing, I got to catch it before it ends. So I want to open this up and I want to click on this button as fast as possible. And they make it really easy to do that. So I love Shazam for this keep it simple mantra. an example of where it went wrong, right? Sidecar, which just went out of business 2 days ago, so it was shut down, I think, this past week. Sidecar actually predates Uber. So Sidecar came out before Uber, and they were the original on-demand taxi service. But if you look at their app, it was so complicated, right? There's so many fields I have to fill out. They weren't harnessing the GPS solution at the time. It's just really complicated when you look at it. So Uber came in here and completely swiped their market by making something super simple. And that's what was amazing about Uber, right? That's what made Uber stand out. It was so simple, and it was such a great concept of that I can open an app, click a button, order. It's just order, right? It would find out where you are, and I can have a taxi come to me. So it was so easy for me to get something on demand. That is the magic of Uber. So Uber came in here with a way better user experience, completely put Sidecar out of business, and it's just been killing it ever since. Rule number 4, usable trumps pretty. This is a really, really big one. So having a pretty application is really important, but if it's not usable, if people can't figure out how to use it, it's not going to work. So let's look. It doesn't matter how pretty anything is, right? Nice looking pot, but if anybody can't use it, if it's not functional, if it doesn't solve a problem, nobody's going to care. So one of my examples of this is Virgin America. So Virgin America got touted for having amazing UX last year. They were like, oh, they won awards, they put out this big redesign of their whole site, and people were like, wow, an airline is innovating in design. This is so cool. And this is an example of part of their site. But to me, Virgin America is one of the hardest to use because they try to trick you. They try to trick you into like purchasing things that you don't want to do. And that's not actually really a great experience for the user, right? So I don't actually book anything with Virgin America anymore because I can't figure out how to use their site. So if you look on this, you might go, oh, great. Here's my seating arrangements. Let me just click on something and I'll be able to book a seat. But what you don't see is like very small down in this area is all different price ranges for booking an extra seat, which adds on more money to what you already have. But it's really hard to find that when you're automatically in this mode of let me go book my seat. Also, Virgin America moved their price up to here, and it's taken everybody years to find it. They're like, I have no idea where the price list anymore because it all used to be over here and it's been standardized on every other site. So it's good to innovate, but if you innovate too much, if you make it really pretty but really hard to find and you don't follow normal standards, it's really hard to use. On the flip side, we've got WhatsApp. WhatsApp is not a pretty application at all, right? It's kind of ugly. It's got a weird background. It's got little bubbles. It's just pretty simple. But it's one of the most used applications anywhere, right? It doesn't have to be pretty. It's just incredibly functional. People know how to use it, and they don't care. They just don't care what it looks like. And that's why it's winning. It's solving a great problem. It's super useful. You can use it very easily. They can go back and fix the design later. They don't have to do anything else to it. People just love it. So it doesn't have to be pretty to be a winner in a market if it's really useful. So my rule for design is first make it useful, then make it usable, finally make it pretty. So the last rule here is no design is permanent. So we get into large discussions as teams about what's the best design, and we iterate and we iterate and we keep going over what to do best. But the reality is your design's always going to change. It's never going to look like that for the rest of your life. So don't worry about it. Just get out there and test. When I worked at the e-commerce company in New York, we were one of the biggest e-commerce companies at the time. It was a startup. And we changed this page maybe like 90 times 1 month to figure out like, how can we get that extra little bump in design? And we actually hired this firm to come in here, do a ton of A/B testing, and figure out which kind of page setup would convert better. And what we found out is what they gave us back was like this really mashed up version of the page that just looked terrible. So we went back and we changed it too. But the thing is, we changed the site so many times, so we would get into these long conversations every time we changed it about like, what should it be? How should it be? And it would take 3 or 4 weeks to plan it. But in reality, you have to just put it out there for a couple days, see if it converts. And if it doesn't, you take it down and fix it. So we should have been having more like conversation and mock it up out there, see what happens, take it back. Don't get too stuck up into these things. You have to experiment. The only way you're going to succeed with any kind of design is to experiment and figure out what do users want. Don't hold on to your own designs for too long. Don't make them perfect. Just get it out there and see what happens. Because we need to treat our designs more like a hypothesis, right? We're not sure it's going to work until it's actually out there alive. So refine it, make it good enough, get it out there, test it with people, see what they think, then go back and refine it when you actually have knowledge that you can base it off of. When we do this too, we start finding what people really like, right? We find things that are really interesting to them. This cat usually wiggles. Sorry, it's a GIF. But they get really excited about things. So something to remember too is user experience is the entire experience. UX, it encompasses the experience from the moment that somebody hears about your product to the first second that they hear about it, all the way through until they leave you. And they will leave you one day, but you have to make sure that experience is the best experience possible. And it doesn't just encompass visual design, it encompasses all touch points of your product. So really sit back, try to figure out, how do I make this delightful for my user? How do I make sure they have the best experience they possibly can while they're a part of our community and a customer of ours? And if you do that and you follow these 5 rules, you're sure to win your user experience. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Melissa, thank you very much for the great presentation. I mean, what is the
I left you for a second.
Presentation, and what is the most common mistake does the entrepreneurs do while in the process of user experience and user interface?
Yeah, at the very early stages of a company, the biggest problem everybody makes is making their product too complicated to use, I think. So they don't really spend time thinking about, like, how do I jump over these hurdles to, or how do I remove the hurdles, the barriers people need to join. So if you're new and you're in a competitive market, you have to make it as simple as possible to get onto your platform, to sign up, to execute a task. So that's a really important part of it. Like, there is a flow and there is a time in startups where you have to capture somebody's attention. So the time you can minimize for somebody to take that first action that's going to make them come back on your site is incredibly important. So you want to make sure it's really simple to use. Go back and make it more beautiful afterwards. Like, don't worry about all the bells and whistles. Don't worry about the cool, like, mobile app slidings and stuff. Just make it super simple to sign up, achieve an action, and get value as fast as possible. That's the most important thing that you can do at the beginning stages.
Also, there is a question, I think, Divan, you showed all the mobile apps. My query is, how important is UX for a cloud-based software as a service platform, and should the UX be same for the community and enterprise?
Yeah, I showed a lot of mobile apps, but I actually work on more SaaS platforms and mobile apps. SaaS is incredibly important. I can't show them to you, unfortunately, because they're all under NDA right now. But SaaS platforms are really important for user experience, and I think there's so much opportunity to do it better there. So when you look at SaaS, you have to think of the same way as if it was a consumer experience. You still have users. They're people sitting at their office, in their desk, right? Think about the tasks that they're doing daily. How do you make it easier for them to do their job? How can you give them insights that would take them hours to dig through on themselves? That's like the key for the user experience around the SaaS thing. So you should really make it nice. You should make it pretty to look at, but you have to make it usable. A really good example of where people go wrong in SaaS is dashboards to me. This drives me nuts. So a lot of times people will put all these gadgets on their dashboards, right? Like every stat you could possibly imagine so people can see it when they come in. What you should think about with dashboards, though, is what are the tasks my users are going to do immediately after looking at this dashboard? Like, what should people go do after this dashboard? And how can I give them the information that they need to go do it? So your dashboard should inform actions. They should all be actionable, right? If I'm going to look at a dashboard for an e-commerce site and I'm working in, the people who source the products and sell it, my biggest question every time I open up a SaaS platform for e-commerce is, what's my best selling product and what's my worst selling products? What should I get rid of? What should I promote today? Right? So you want to answer those questions straight up on your dashboards. So SaaS is incredibly important to worry about user experience, and you have a huge opportunity there too, because too many people don't understand that. So if you really look at that part, I think you can get ahead of a lot of people in SaaS right now. But there are more and more people are coming to ask me to redesign their SaaS platforms. They all understand it, but they still see it more of a visual component than a user experience component, which is not going to win for them in the long run. And the UX should be the same for community and enterprise. I don't really know what you mean. Does that mean like consumers out in the enterprise? I think whatever UX you're designing, just try to design it the best you can, right? You should try to keep a consistency between everything on your site. Everything should have the same kind of brand and look the same. But you can totally, if you have a different function of the part of site, use that to your advantage. Like try to figure out, why are people coming to my site? What should I do? And how can I create a UI or user experience around this that will enhance them doing what they need to do? That's the way that I look at it.
Which are the
Next
favorite
question.
UX tools? Which are the favorite UX tools and A/B test tools, especially for the startups?
Yeah, A/B test tools, I really like Optimizely. It's pretty easy. You can test everything with HTML right in there. You don't have to go back and do releases on your site. So that's really great. For UX tools, I use Sketch a lot now. It's replaced Illustrator for me. So you can make very low-level sketches. You can make very high-level sketches. No, I'm sorry, not sketches, wireframes in there. And it syncs really well with a lot of different applications, which is nice. Also, my favorite thing for testing anything is InVision. So while you're mocking up your products, you can take the individual screens at any fidelity that it is and upload them to InVision, link them together so that you can actually play with the flow of your application and see if you missed anything. I do this for all my clients. Anytime I'm designing something, even at the earliest stages, even if I'm just sketching things on a whiteboard, I take a picture of them, I put them into InVision, I highlight things, I link at them, and I make sure the flow makes sense. I make sure what I need to accomplish, I can accomplish in there, and then I go back and I make it more high fidelity. So always start at like pen and paper, get a whiteboard, draw, just like draw as much as possible, throw it out if it sucks. Then when you get to a place where you've got something, an idea, a broad idea, then go into Sketch, go into Illustrator, start mocking things up a little bit more high fidelity, test it with people, see if they understand it, and go back and make it pretty, right? So you got to take baby steps in order to get up to the visual design part. What's next?
Another question is, what would you like to recommend for startups who doesn't have sources to hire a designer?
Yeah, I would train yourself. Like hiring a designer is really important. I want to say this. Like I know you guys don't have a lot of money, but we didn't either. And I would say like everybody's all about the engineers, which is great. I definitely love working with engineers, but you need to get a designer in there early, and you should get somebody who does know UX early, because otherwise you're gonna have to rip up everything later. So the earlier you can hire a designer, the better. It'll also increase your chances of success, since you need to get those MVPs there first and make sure that the public actually likes them. And they're more likely to like them if they're pretty good and they're usable and simple. So make sure a designer is an early hire. If you can't hire a designer right now, go train yourselves on some basic UX principles. There's a million magazines out there. UX Mag is a perfect magazine. That's the example I got the BBC one from. You can learn very good tips and tricks there. InVision, the one I was talking about, the tool, they have a blog that tells you all about like some great UX tips. Just practice yourselves. Get like a notebook out, sketch, practice wireframing. Try to get to that point. Then if you need some more polish, I can do visual design. It's not my favorite thing. So a lot of times I'll get to a wireframe point and then I'll go on freelancer.com and I'll hire somebody for $50 to go and like polish up my wireframes, make them look better so I can pop them into InVision and build it myself. That's always a great option too. If you can't afford a designer, hire a freelancer to give you more polish, to give you more input. It's really going to be worth the money at the end of the day to do that. What's next?
Next question is, hey Melissa, I would like to ask that where we should place the hamburger button on our apps or a mobile website. For example, it's easier to use hamburger with the right thumb, or the other hand, Spotify or this application, click meeting places on it left. It's a kind of important for us since we are making websites mobile friendly.
Okay. So this might be controversial, but there's been a lot of angst and anger in the UX world about this hamburger icon because it does save space, but it's really not intuitive to figure out what it does. So if you're going to use hamburger icon, I think naturally I go for the top left to go into the menu. Top right works too. I haven't actually seen any studies about which one is better. I would never put it on the bottom. One thing, though, to know about the hamburger menu, and I think Luke W., who's really great at mobile applications and doing mobile first stuff, he's the one who pushed that. He hates the hamburger menu, and we do too. And it's because it hides really important information. It's fine to roll stuff up in a menu like settings or things that you don't visit normally, but you should try to surface as much navigation as somebody would use on a daily basis. So if I'm going into your app, for example, like Spotify, when I go into Spotify, I always go to my music, but instead I open Spotify every single time. It puts me somewhere else. Then I have to go to the menu, then I got to go down to my music, and then I go into another menu, and then I click on playlists. It's a lot of freaking menus. Like, it would be great if it was just my music on the bottom and I could click on it, or playlist on the bottom, right? Try to surface on the bottom of your application as much navigation as you possibly can. It really makes a world of difference if people can take one click to get to their most important places rather than 3 clicks through a menu thing. And that's why hamburger, especially like on your first time visiting something, is really confusing because you're like, what's in here? I don't know where I can go. I don't know what I can do here. So consider using it in conjunction with something else maybe. If you're going to have to use it, if you want to use a hamburger menu, I would even put like maybe a different icon on there that signals it is a menu, right? Like the hamburger little things are just a little bit confusing. So I would try to keep it either on the top left or the top right. It kind of depends on the layout of the rest of your application too. It's kind of hard for me to make that judgment without seeing the rest. But I would always keep it on the top, never put it on the bottom.
The other question comes from Efe. What kind of data have you used to validate the design?
So we use both qualitative and quantitative data to do a design. So quantitative kind of answers the what is going on right now, but then you need qualitative data, which means going out and talking to people to answer the why, right? You always need to answer this why question. So quantitative data, we look at like click-through rates. We'll look at mouse overs. I use like ClickTail to see where people are spending their time, if they're scrolling, if they're not clicking on these buttons I think they should be clicking on, those types of things. Google, Google Analytics, they allow you to put like wrappers around the buttons and stuff so you can see how many people are clicking through it, which is great. All those things inform design. Also to get people to sit down and watch them use your product, right? Just watch them use it, see where their eyes go, see if they're scrolling, give them tasks to do too. When I do usability testing as well, I'll bring somebody in. I may have seen like online in Google Analytics, people aren't clicking on the settings, right? Like nobody's clicked on settings. And my hypothesis is it's really hard for them to find. So I'll bring somebody in, I'll sit them down at the computer and I'll say, can you please change your address for us, right? Like I don't say find settings, I say, can you change your address? And I watch how much time it takes them to actually find settings, go in and change their address. Great things to do. That counts as data as well. So use your quantitative stuff to figure out what's going on, like what's the current state, and then use your qualitative usability testing to say, okay, why? Like why is this actually happening?
And the other question is, what do you think about the colors on design? Are they important in UX? And does it differ from different websites or applications?
Yeah, so colors are always important, but I honestly do all my UX design in black and white, and I think that's what you should test in before you develop your app, right? So if I'm uploading sketches to InVision, I do everything in black and white. I give them to people, I let them test it out so I can really understand the flow, what's going on. Then I go back and I add color. Because if you add color too early, people get very distracted. They're like, I don't like the shade of blue. You should change the shade of blue. And you're like, shade of blue has got nothing to do with what I'm asking right now. So at the early stage process, I just completely do it black and white. Once people are like, this is the flow, this is the experience that makes sense, I go back in, I add, colorful graphics and stuff like that. So color too, you got to think of what's the audience, right? Are you making it for kids? They like colorful, really fun stuff. Are you making it for corporate? Maybe it's a little bit more subdued, but you add pops of colors to highlight things. Color definitely is important, definitely enhances it. I think great colors can make a huge difference. Just don't worry about them too early in the process. Get your experience down, get your flow down, make sure everything's there, and then go back in, highlight things with colors, use it to convey your brand and your message and the actions, right? Use it to draw people's eyes, use it to signal what people should do, and work from there.
Since design is always changing, how now when you have reached the optimal point?
Exactly. That's a really tough question. Everybody's always asking about that. I set a goal. I say like this design, we want to get to a 40% improvement and in like signups, and we're going to test until we get there. And once you hit 40%, I go, okay, I'm done. And then I work, I just leave it. It's kind of a subjective thing, but you can make it, I would encourage you to make it as goal-oriented as possible so you don't get into this stuck of like this loop of just completely iterating over and over and over and over again on your designs. You don't want to get there. I think as soon as you hit your goals that I talked about, it's time to move on, focus on something else with the design. That's how I keep myself honest, and that's how I don't get stuck in the loops of always optimizing.
And are there trends in the design? I mean, or is it, you have also mentioned the
I lost you.
presentation, is it
I lost you. Where's I'm trying to see where the trends one is. Okay, I'll just go with
better the design or
what?
Just to do by alone?
I keep losing you. You keep cutting in and out on me. I'm just gonna. Can you type the question or copy and paste it? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So early times, there's few users, especially if it's B2B. Is it meaningful to do A/B tests? And if not, what should you do for testing iteration? Okay, that's great. So yeah, I think it's meaningful to do A/B testing early stage B2B. What I would do is when you're a B2B company, you have your customers readily available there because you know exactly who you're selling to, and you probably have people sitting at their desk using it. So I would totally take advantage of that. It's so much harder for a consumer company to actually go out and find people who have never used their product before. So I would go take those people, sit down with them, and show them like screen flows, like an envision of what you're doing, and watch them use it. And you'll get way more feedback that way. That's a great way to test and iterate on your designs. I would do A/B testing on more larger things with, I wouldn't do A/B testing. Okay, so here's it's good to A/B test larger things in B2B software, although sometimes that gets tricky. Companies don't want one person having experience versus another. It's good if you're going to do it on basic design things and not move everything all over the place. But what I would advocate doing is take a subset of users on your platform and designate them as a test group. And that test group gets released new features early so that they can use it. And you've got tracking on those new features so that you can see what's going on, who's doing what, and what's happening there. And then that allows you to really say, okay, should we release this feature to everyone or should we take it back and redesign it? So when you're doing early stages, I would do like a very simple product that accomplishes, you know, their top goals. And then every time you roll out a goal, release to like a small subset of users that new feature, test it, make sure it's great, put out new iterations on it, figure out what's going on with it, and then decide if you want to roll it out to everyone or not. Okay, what are the latest trends in design, and is there a Google effect? What is the Google effect? Or any other influencers? So whoever asked about the Google, yeah, there you are.
It's me.
Yes.
So I meant that Google is also kind of very dominant on customers, and most of the users is familiar with the Google design. So if they change a kind of design concept, the other websites are also influenced.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You keep breaking up, but I kind of get it. So you're saying Google has been like seen as this design like head, and if they change their websites, other people start to take note. I do see that, although I think Google material design, I would say, I see you guys talking about it. It's definitely trending at the moment, and Google's pretty good at that, although Apple's way better. But I think Google, you keep breaking up, Barack. I get like every word every once in a while, but I think with Google, every large company is going to spark a trend, right? So when Tinder took off, they sparked a trend. When Google releases something new, they spark a trend. So anybody who's got a lot of notoriety in a startup world and tech world, people are going to flock to it and copy it. You see that all the time. And I would say be careful about trends. Like trends are great when my friend Brian Kalma, he said this at one of the workshops I did. Brian was our head of UX at Zappos at Gilt Group. He was at Zappos like when it started. You know, he helped it take off. That's like a really huge thing. And through all his experience, he said, when you're looking to innovate on stuff or follow trends, you know, follow trends that achieve goals that people have already done, right? So shopping carts. People have tested shopping carts like crazy. Like they found the right balance for it. They found out what colors you should make it. They figured out how many forms to fill out. Like it's a known thing. So just follow the standard trends for shopping carts. With other things, especially new things that show up in UI or UX, I'd be careful about following them because I'm not sure they've been proven yet. People get on that bandwagon, but it's people like us, right, who are actually designing things ourselves. And we go, oh, that's really cool. But we're not sure if consumers are using it or if your people are using it. And you're not sure that their design, their way of doing things, solves the same problems that your users have. So I would be very careful to jump on the bandwagon of, you know, Tinder swipes, whatever Google came out, Apple came out with flat design, right? And then everybody was like, flat design. And it's actually really hard for people with accessibility problems like eyesight to distinguish between. And then when people make apps for them, they use flat design, and everybody's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have done that, right? So you have to think about the context of who your users are, and then go back and see if this trend here actually solves the same problem for our users. Don't readily adopt things, and don't feel bad about innovating on it, right? You can make your own new designs, but innovate on something that matters for your company, right? If you were a company that does shopping carts, for example, like you want to be the #1 shopping cart for all e-commerce sites, then you're going to iterate on your design like crazy. If you're just an e-commerce site, slap on the design for the shopping cart that's been proven, move on, work on your products. That's kind of how I see like where what to do with trends and like which ones to follow and which ones not to follow. Okay, so next one.
So what are the testing models? B2C companies, how can we test our UI, UX efficiency?
Okay. Oh, B2C companies. Okay, great. So you can do a lot of A/B testing in B2C. Segment your market out. Do it that way. We do that quite a bit. I think A/B tests are great because they give you a standard for like the old design versus the new design, so you can see if you get an uplift in a goal. So I would always use an A/B test that way. Don't split it up into like A, B, C, D, E, F, G tests. It's just too much, right? Like focus on 1, 2, 3 tests. That's about it. So A/B tests work really well. I do usability tests. I get people in the room to sit down with them. Marketing tests. So if you're working in acquisition, try message testing a lot of stuff. So I'll message test things through Facebook, through Twitter, on small parts of the landing page to make sure that we actually have the value proposition down and to see what people actually understand about it. I think that's really important for it. UI, UX testing, again, it's just putting the analytics around it, seeing if people are achieving the goals that you set for it, bringing people in. I can't stress enough how much you're going to learn to get somebody, when you take somebody into the office, sit them down and watch them use something, it's going to blow your mind. You're going to get so much more information that way than you would off of any analytic platform. Like, you need to bring people in, you need to get them to sit down and use your stuff. And if you can do that, you're going to have so much information to go on and so much better direction on what to do. All right, there are many screens now.
There are many screens now.
Okay. Barack, you keep cutting out on me all the time, so I'm gonna just.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna just.
All right.
Repeat it. There are many screens now: iPhone, iPad, different phone brands, TVs, webs, etc. How do designers consolidate designs? It's a great question. We were actually talking about that too at the company that I'm coaching at today. There are a lot of screens. I think what the trend is going towards right now is trying to figure out how do we make a cohesive brand experience between everything, so that people know where things are. I think the most important thing about designing for multiple devices is make sure your actions are located in the places people expect them to be, right? This kind of goes back towards to the menu thing. I see a lot of companies, and they're trying to make their websites responsive for mobile, but they put the hamburger icon on their landing page on a giant desktop screen. That's terrible, because now I'm looking for all these menu items. I've got so much real estate on top that I could use to get people to my things faster, but I've got it all on a hamburger. So where you can, I would make sure that you're designing for the medium that the person is on. Remember, people want to do different things on mobile versus on desktop. Different actions that they would take. For example, with banking, on my mobile application, I might want to pay a bill and I might want to check my balance. On the desktop, I'm going to want to download statements. I'm going to want to send money to somebody. Maybe I want to go back into history 6 months ago. I want to see my benefits, my perks. There's so much more information there. So don't worry about making different experiences for each platform. Just make complementary experiences. But I would make sure that you keep your branding, your colors, your locations of where things are located. Like your menus, the things, right? Like my address is always going to be under settings, right? If I know that across all the screens, that's really important. But you're probably going to have to mock up different experiences for different things depending on how big your platform is. If you've got a smaller B2C platform where you're taking the same type of actions as you would on desktop versus mobile, maybe your screens are going to look very similar. They're just going to be expanded. But take note of what space you have, what people are doing in the context of when they're using it, right? So if I'm using my desktop, I'm either at work or I'm at home, right? I'm never going to be using it on the go. When I'm on my mobile app, I might be walking in New York and there's like 7 million people walking at me. I got to be really quick doing this, right? I don't want to run into people. Desktop, I have time to sit there and figure things out. So take that into context when you're trying to figure out like, how do I figure out which designs to do and how do I consolidate it? Also with your teams, make sure like you've got everybody working together. So the team that I'm working with right now, it's got about, I think 150 people here. And they've got 4, 5 UX designers working across 3 or 4 teams, including mobile, including like offline experiences. They ship physical products and the site. So they all have to come together and make sure that the changes they're making are reflected everywhere. If there's a new sign-up flow on desktop, how does that translate into mobile? So they sit down and they kind of figure out what are the changes that go hand in hand together, and they work together that way. And that's really important. Okay, what's next? Yeah, I definitely think mobile first design is incredibly but I completely think so, but it depends on the nature of what people are doing. I think as time goes on, this is going to be huge, right? This is going to explode. I find myself personally using my phone for absolutely everything I use my desktop for. I used to be very particular about shopping on my phone. I didn't like doing it. Now I like order from Amazon all the time on my phone. It's a bad habit. But you're going to see this happen more and more and more. But think about, again, where are people using your product, right? If you're doing a B2B company and people are going to use it at work, don't worry about the mobile app yet, right? Like, you think about that later. That's an add-on feature. If you're doing a B2C company and it's something where people can kill time, where they have to do an action really quickly, think about how they're sitting on the couch watching TV and maybe they pull up your phone and they're like, oh yeah, let me go check out this app. Let me go order stuff. Maybe go check on these things. That's when you want to work on mobile design first. Like, try to figure out what context people should be using your app in more. If they're going to use it as a lifestyle or around the house or at friends, or they're sitting bored in a movie theater and they hate the movie that's on, right? They're going to be playing on their phones. Then you want to be mobile first. If you're doing something that's a little bit more complex and you know they need more brain power for it, they're going to want to sit down and use your desktop. Then you want to do desktop first. So think about it in the context. I think the more it goes on and the more sophisticated our phones get, we're going to see a lot more mobile first design though. And I would capitalize on that trend if you can and if it's right for you at the beginning. Cool.
So,
who's next?
Any questions? So if there is no question, yes, I think so. Melissa, thank you very much. Great presentation and also question and answer session. We sincerely thank you. Puya is, I think, probably something. So thank you and having a webinar, great webinar. Hope to see you in Istanbul this year again in Startup Istanbul.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks, guys. It was so good to talk to you. Feel free to reach out
Thank you,
if you have any more
Melissa.
questions. Bye.
Thank you, Melissa. Bye-bye.